This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. Sorry to keep you waiting. Here are some of the stories we're going to try to get to. FBI Director Kash Patel testified before the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, and related agencies. He was trying to help configure a budget for fiscal year 2027. Kash Patel was joined by the directors today of other federal law enforcement agencies, including the heads of the DEA, the ATF, and the U.S. Marshal Services. This is Senator Chris Van Hollen. He's the Democratic senator from Maryland. He began his questioning by addressing reports in Atlantic Magazine about Patel's excessive drinking.
Director Sakata, you hold a position of public trust. You agree that you should lead by example and be held to at least the same standard of conduct as you expect of ATF agents?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree that if one of your agents was unable to perform his or her duties because of excessive drinking, you would need to take corrective action or disciplinary measures?
Yes, sir.
Director Seralta, same question for you with
Wonder where
respect
he's
to
leading
the
with
U.S.
this.
Marshal Service. Do you agree with the responses from Director Sakata?
Ranking Member Van Hollen, that would be correct. I would do that after a thorough investigation by our internal affairs.
Administrator Cole, same question to you with respect to the DEA.
Yes, sir. I would echo what Rob and Gaddy have said. After a thorough review by our OPR, Office of Professional Responsibility, yes, sir.
Director Patel, do you agree with these three gentlemen as
Yes, sir.
the FBI? So you agree, Director Patel, that if one of your agents was unable to perform his or her duties because of excessive drinking, you would need to take corrective or disciplinary action. You agree with that statement?
We would implement the inspection review process, just like these other agencies have their own internal investigations, and complete that review.
As I said in my opening remarks, I really don't care about your personal life so long as you are able to perform your public and official responsibilities, which are awesome responsibilities. Multiple reports, including reporting by The Atlantic, have alleged episodes of excessive drinking, unexplained absences, and behavior that concern current and former FBI and DOJ officials.
Okay. It is against FBI rules for unauthorized drinking. You're not allowed to drink on the job or off the job. You're not allowed to be inebriated. It's grounds for dismissal. In the immediate aftermath of that Atlantic article, Jamie Raskin, the House Democrat from Maryland, same state as Senator Van Hollen, Jamie Raskin wrote a letter to FBI Director Kash Patel demanding that Patel take a test called Audit. It was established by the World Health Organization to determine whether someone is a problem drinker.
Are you willing to take the test, it's called the audit test, that members of our active duty military and others take to determine whether they have a drinking problem?
I'll take any test you're willing to take.
I will take it, Director Patel. I'll take it. You ready to take it?
Let's go.
Yes or no?
Let's go. Side by side.
I'll take it. All right.
All right. According to multiple reports in The Atlantic, Patel administers polygraph tests, not audits, not to test for alcoholism, but polygraph tests inside the FBI to determine who is loyal to both him and Donald Trump. Also, there are reports that Kash Patel has been forcing agents to strap on a lie detector test to determine who's been leaking stories about Kash Patel's alleged drinking.
You ordered polygraph tests of members of your team to determine how that story came about?
The FBI conducts polygraph tests all the time.
No, have you ordered polygraph tests for members of your team to determine who was the source of the stories that I'm asking you about?
I don't order any polygraph tests. There's an internal inspection review process for any and all leaks, especially of baseless information at the FBI, that's been in place for the last 30 years. Those processes are followed by career intelligence and agents on the ground.
So I'll take that as a yes, since you said that these were unauthorized disclosures. I have another round of questioning regarding your firing people who were important to gathering intelligence with respect to Iran, but I'll wait for my second round.
Second round of drinks, according to Kash Patel. I think that's what Senator Van Hollen might have meant. Watch.
Multiple reports, including reporting by The Atlantic, have alleged episodes of excessive drinking, unexplained absences, and behavior that concern current and former FBI and DOJ officials. You have publicly denied those allegations and filed a defamation lawsuit. So today, as you testify before Congress, is it your testimony that those allegations are categorically false?
Unequivocally, categorically false.
So there have been no occasions during your tenure when FBI personnel were unable to promptly reach you?
Absolutely not. You can ask my entire workforce. They hear from me at every single hour of the day, as do these great gentlemen here, as do the men and women of the interagency and state and local law enforcement and the White House.
And so there have been no occasions when your security detail had difficulty waking or locating you, is that right?
Nope, it's a total farce. I don't even know where you get this stuff, but it doesn't make it credible because you say so.
I'm not saying it, Director Patel. It's been written and documented.
You are literally saying it.
No, I'm saying that these are reports, Director Patel.
No,
And
unlike
I
your
will
baseless
say,
reports, the only person that was slinging margaritas in El Salvador on the taxpayer dollar with a convicted gangbanging rapist was you.
You know,
the only person that ran up a
Director
$7,000 bar tab in Washington, D.C. at the lobby bar was you.
This
so the only
suggests
individual
to
in this
me
room
the
that
allegations
has been drinking
are
on
true.
taxpayer dime during
Are
the day
you polygraphing?
is you.
Director Patel, come on. These are serious allegations that were made against you. They're
The
in a
allegations
lawsuit
are
that you
false.
filed.
You drinking margaritas with a gangbanger
actually,
is true and on
it
video.
just goes to show you
running a
don't- this
$7,000
goes-
bar tab at the lobby bar
Director Patel,
has been filed by your own
this
office.
goes to show-
drink during the day. That's
Chair-
you.
Mr.
This
Chairman-
is the ultimate example of hypocrisy.
Chairman-
I will not be tarnished by baseless allegations
let me
and
ask
fraudulent
questions.
statements from the media.
The fact that you mentioned that indicates you don't know what you are talking about. Now, here, Director
The only thing I know
Patel-
is you're the one drinking margaritas with felons.
Actually, that's a false statement, and I'm asking you about your statements.
I've answered that.
And I'm asking you about a particular report.
Okay, so this is Abrego Garcia. He is the young gentleman who came to America when he was in his teens, and then he was accidentally deported to that El Salvadoran dungeon last year by ICE. It was a mistake. They said, oops. And because he's a constituent of Senator Van Hollen's, Senator Van Hollen went down to El Salvador and arranged for Abrego Garcia to be temporarily released from that dungeon so they could have coffee and talk about how to get him back to the United States to his wife and baby. This is Senator Van Hollen with Abrego Garcia. Do you see a margarita here? Is anybody slinging back margaritas? I see water, I see coffee, maybe an espresso. I don't see margaritas. And calling Abrego Garcia a convicted gangbanger and rapist. The head of the FBI today, Tuesday, called Abrego Garcia a convicted gangbanger and rapist. So I don't know what the Westfall Act says about FBI directors accusing someone of being a convicted gangbanger and rapist. Abrego Garcia is not a gangbanger. The reason he came to the United States was to escape MS-13. He's not a convicted rapist. I don't know what the law is when it comes to FBI directors defaming innocent people. All I know is Abrego Garcia was accidentally sent to that dungeon in El Salvador last year, despite a judge's court order strictly forbidding Garcia from being sent back to El Salvador because the judge said, I think it was 2019, he's not a member of a gang, and if he's sent back to El Salvador, he'll be forced to join one. No margarita at the restaurant, right? More questioning from Senator Chris Van Hollen.
Director,
Yep, what happened?
in your response to me earlier, where you had a little bit of a blow up,
Let's try this again.
Director Patel,
Oh, sorry.
Director Patel, I've been listening carefully to your responses to some of my colleagues. And Director Patel, I've been listening carefully to your responses to some of my colleagues. And I want to start with a question that Senator Coons asked you that relates to this article where the headline is Kash Patel's latest firings ousted agents with expertise in Iran. The article says that these individuals were fired for their role in the classified documents investigations of Donald Trump. First of all, is that true?
The article, just like all the other articles you cited, is false, and there's ongoing litigation, so I can't address it.
Okay. You did answer Senator Coons, and I understood your answer to be that the people that were fired, that none of them were part of the group that had Iran expertise. Is that your answer?
No, he asked if they were Iran experts. I said they were not.
Were the group fired? Did it include people who were Iran experts?
No.
Did it include people who were involved in counter-espionage activities with respect to Iran?
I don't have the list in front of me.
So you don't know whether or not you fired people with counter-espionage experience with respect to Iran. You don't know the answer to that question.
I terminated anyone and everyone that weaponized law enforcement.
I see. So it was related, obviously, to the classified documents case. So
That's not what I said.
Well,
More from Senator Chris Van Hollen and Kash Patel.
in your response to me earlier, where you had a little bit of a blow up, you made a couple provably false statements.
So did you.
No, Mr. Director, I was reading about and asking you to respond to allegations that are made. In fact, I was giving you an opportunity to do that, and you took that opportunity. But in the process, you made these provably false statements that I know are sort of like urban legend in right-wing media about margaritas in El Salvador, which is provably false. And so coming from the mouth of an FBI director to make provably false statements in a hearing like this is extremely troubling. And it leads me to ask whether or not the other things you've been saying are false statements. And so because that's a provably false statement. You made a couple others that are provably false. And this is from the mouth of the FBI director.
The only one that made false
question-
statements is you.
My final question to you, Mr. Director, is do you know that it is a crime to lie to Congress? Do you know that? That's my last question.
I have not lied to Congress.
I didn't
The one
ask you that.
lied to Congress is you. And
I'm not testifying here, sir, and I don't lie.
maybe the next time you run up a $7,000 bar tab, we can talk about it.
Well, see, there you go, lying again. You suggested
In the
that was-
FEC report, I'll post it right now.
You suggested it was
Hang
public.
on.
It wasn't public money, as you know. That was for a 50-member staff party.
So it was a $7,000 bar tab.
Mr.
Oh,
Patel, I'm glad. Let me just say in closing, Mr. Chairman, two things. I'm glad that you have agreed to take the test regarding, whether you have alcohol problems. I'm glad you agreed with me to do that. You still haven't answered my final question. Do you know, Mr. Director, that it is a crime to lie to Congress? Do you know that?
I do not lie to Congress.
I didn't ask you that.
And you're insinuating that I am because
I asked
you want
whether you know.
You want to correct your time in this session where you got steamrolled by the facts so you can have a Twitter narrative so
Mr.
you can go
Director.
raise more money and spend more money on $7,000 bar
Just let the
and
record
I'm not
show,
gonna give
Mr.
it to
Chairman.
you.
The director of the FBI apparently does not want to answer the question about whether or not it's a crime to lie to Congress, and I find that extremely troubling.
I find it troubling that you lie to the American
with
people
law
every
enforcement.
day.
You are a disgrace, Mr. Director.
Not
and
nearly as
the
big as
fact that
you.
you can't answer that question, I will. That concludes my questioning, Mr. Chairman. But I'm obviously very troubled.
This is the behavior you would see from Laurent Beria, Stalin's henchman, before whatever looked like a Duma before Stalin shut it down. Kash Patel is bringing up a $7,000 bar tab that was not public money. Senator Van Hollen was throwing a party at a bar that came out of his super PAC, not federal money. It was for 50 people. He wasn't drinking in a bar and racking up a $7,000 bar bill. That's the first thing. About lying under oath and perjuring yourself, Patel claimed earlier that he's not opening up investigations, criminal probes, into journalists who write unfavorably about him. Well, I don't know what the perjury laws are exactly. I do know that there was a reporter about 6 weeks ago from the New York Times, a woman who exposed Kash Patel's use of FBI planes to shepherd his girlfriend around the country for her performances. She's a singer. And this reporter from the New York Times detailed Kash Patel's insistence that wherever she travels, FBI field offices assign their SWAT teams to protect Kash Patel's girlfriend, and sometimes his girlfriend's girlfriend. And he denied that he opened up any criminal investigations. Well, we know that he opened up the beginnings of a criminal probe into that female reporter from the New York Times. They were looking into whether or not the reporter had violated anti-stalking laws because she was digging in to the relationship between Kash Patel and his girlfriend and the use of public funds for them to have a good time. And the FBI looked into whether or not that reporter had violated anti-stalking laws. When the New York Times contacted the FBI, they quickly dropped the criminal probe. We also know that I believe the reporter from The Atlantic, her name is Sarah Fitzpatrick, she has been talking to at least 30 FBI personnel anonymously. There is now a criminal probe. They have launched a criminal probe into this reporter from The Atlantic because of the stories she keeps writing about Kash Patel's absences, his drinking, his branded bourbon that he hands out to people, and his panic attacks, coming in allegedly hungover, screaming at people, thinking he's been fired. Very erratic behavior that you kind of expect a guy who's hungover, he would testify this way and be this disrespectful and self-destructive while testifying before Congress. But he's Beria. He doesn't believe in democracy or checks and balances. He believes in himself and serving Stalin, serving Trump. So Trump is giving him kudos right now. And I don't know if you heard the rustling of papers. You want to play that back. He's thumbing through his white burn book, the same burn book that Pam Bondi unsuccessfully used when she was testifying before the House Judiciary Committee. We'll keep track of Kash Patel. This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Please like this episode. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. I'm having trouble connecting with a lot of you. I can't communicate with the live chat room for some reason. And I'm asking you to go to davidfeldmanshow.com and subscribe to my newsletter, davidfeldmanshow.com. I will not use your email. I won't give it away, and I won't abuse you with a lot of things going into your inbox. I will only communicate with you probably at the most 2 or 3 times a month when I need to contact you with my newsletter or a big announcement. So please sign up for my newsletter at davidfeldmanshow.com. I don't want to be at the mercy of Apple, Google, Spotify in order to communicate with my listeners. The New York Times is reporting that the Strait of Hormuz remains pretty much still completely shut down. This after Donald Trump on Sunday rejected Iran's offer for both sides to reopen Hormuz for 30 days in order to resume negotiations. Trump telling reporters on Monday that Iran's counterproposal was, quote, a piece of garbage, and he warned that the ceasefire, the truce with Iran, is on life support. He said it has a 1% chance of survival. This while several of his staffers laughed at the analogy that the ceasefire has a 1% chance of survival. Well, the ceasefire is on life support, and so is the world economy because of Donald Trump's blockade of Hormuz. The New York Times reporting this morning that in April, our country's inflation rate rose 3.8%. That's the highest in 3 years. He can't win the midterms on his own. He needs Judge Alito and the Supreme Court. Inflation has gotten so bad, in fact, that the cost of the war in Iran so far has jumped from $25 billion to $29 billion in a matter of hours. Pete Hegseth, our defense chief, testified before Congress on Tuesday, and while he was busy telling the press on Monday that the cost of this bombing campaign over Iran, which began on February 28th, came to $25 billion, the next day, Hegseth testified before the House and then the Senate Appropriations Committees, this to establish the Pentagon's budget for 2027. He now claims the war cost $29 billion. In 24 hours, it went from $25 billion to $29 billion. That's inflation, or that's somebody who doesn't know how to read a ledger, somebody who doesn't care what the war is actually costing. He's asking for $1.5 trillion for fiscal year 2027. Washington State Democrat Senator Patty Murray on Tuesday asked Pete Hegseth, how much do you think it's going to cost to rebuild all those American bases throughout the Persian Gulf that have been destroyed by Iranian drones, missiles, and jet fighters? Well, this is one of the most embarrassing questions you can ask Pete Hegseth, and he refuses to answer. Instead, he resorts to his default position of posing the same old rhetorical question when he has no answers to a real question. He has this threadbare, shop-worn response, which is, how much is it worth to keep Iran from getting a nuclear weapon? Also testifying before the two Defense Appropriations Committees on Tuesday was Jules Hurst. He is the chief financial officer for the Pentagon. He oversees pretty much a $1 trillion annual budget. They want to bump it up to 1.5. Hurst, who is the CFO of the Pentagon, he said so far, the Pentagon, this is what he testified. He answered Senator Murray's question. He said, so far, the Pentagon hasn't decided on which American bases in the Persian Gulf will be repaired. And he said it still remains to be seen if the host nations help pick up the costs for the repairs. The United States maintains 13 military bases in the Persian Gulf. We have the entire Fifth Fleet headquartered in Bahrain. We have anywhere between 2 to 3 bases in Bahrain. A lot of this they don't like to talk about. The largest number of American military bases is in Kuwait. We think there are about 5 military bases in Kuwait. You might remember the first Gulf War under George Herbert Walker Bush. We fought that to remove Iraq from Kuwait after Saddam Hussein invaded, and we apparently left behind 5 bases. We have 1 military base in Qatar, 2 in the UAE, and 1 or 2 military bases in Saudi Arabia. And in Saudi Arabia, much of our military presence is situated at Prince Sultan Air Base. You might remember one of the reasons Osama bin Laden attacked us on 9/11 is he said he didn't approve of American bases in Saudi Arabia, that the West was defiling the Holy Land by having military bases in Saudi Arabia. So we've limited our footprint in Saudi Arabia basically to the Prince Sultan Air Base and then some secret military bases that nobody's supposed to know about. On March 28th of this year, Iranian drones destroyed a U.S. AWACS. That's a $700 million aircraft. We only have about 14 of these. They're very expensive, and they coordinate with our satellites and serve as the eyes and ears of the Persian Gulf. They're working with satellites to see missiles and drones right after they've launched, and then the AWACS will assist the air defense systems set up throughout the Persian Gulf. The AWACS, it's a singular, it's called an AWACS, but it's one big $750 million aircraft. It assists in helping our air defenses and the Persian Gulf air defenses that they buy from the United States, helps them all knock missiles and drones out of the sky. That day, on March 28th, besides the AWACS, it is believed a fuel tanker was also destroyed. A flying fuel tanker was also destroyed. There were no air defenses for this $750 million AWACS at the Prince Sultan Air Base. Nobody was protecting these aircrafts, and 12 soldiers, more importantly, were also seriously injured. Pentagon doesn't want to talk about this. We also know on March 3rd, 3 floors of the American embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, were destroyed, including the CIA field offices inside the American embassy. It took 12 hours to put the fire out inside the American embassy in Saudi Arabia. Hundreds of people worked there. They would have all been seriously wounded and or killed had the strikes not happened in the early morning. The Trump administration, Pete Hegseth, they do not want American taxpayers to know about this. But for the past month, there has been extensive reporting, especially from The Guardian, The New York Times, CNN, and The Washington Post, on the damage done to anywhere between 15 and 17 military installations spread out across 8 Persian Gulf countries. Some of these reports say 217 military structures inside these bases were completely destroyed. We're talking barracks, command centers, hangars for airplanes and drones, warehouses, runways, fuel depots, radar systems, and of course, aircraft. Many of these bases now have been described as uninhabitable. And it's why so many of our troops stationed in the Persian Gulf have been forced to move into hotels and apartments in direct violation of the Geneva Conventions, which forbid military personnel from being housed with civilians during war. You can't have men and women with targets on their backs living with civilians. So you're looking at a map of most of our air and naval bases spread out throughout the Persian Gulf, where 50% of the world's known oil reserves are located. And it's really easy, by the way, to take the oil out of the Persian Gulf. So you can see that the United States spends billions a year on military assets to guarantee the flow of oil from the Persian Gulf. This isn't about spreading democracy. We're spending billions every year in the Persian Gulf, and this isn't about spreading democracy. It's about spreading oil from the Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. None of these Persian Gulfs share our democratic values. Well, they share Kash Patel's democratic values and Pete Hegseth's and Donald Trump's democratic values, but not our founding fathers. This is not about spreading freedom and democracy throughout the Middle East. In fact, there's Iran. Back in 1953, when Iran was a functioning democracy with a duly elected prime minister named Mossadegh, our CIA overthrew Mossadegh because Mossadegh was trying to nationalize Iran's oil. We replaced Mossadegh with the Shah, who hated democratic values. We didn't want a fully functioning democracy in Iran. We wanted the oil. This is the Persian Gulf, right? Can you see it? That's where 25% of the world's oil comes from. More than 30% of the world's fertilizer, rare earths, we got aluminum, steel. At least a third of all that comes from the Persian Gulf. In terms of the economy, this is one of the most essential maritime theaters on the planet. And that's why we have so many air bases. Look at that. Look at all the air bases we have along the coastline of the Persian Gulf, starting up in the northern part of the Gulf with Kuwait, and you work your way down to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, Dubai, and all the way down and around the tip to Oman, where you have the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Oman. That's where nearly half of America's entire active duty naval fleet is parked ever since Donald Trump decided to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. It is Donald Trump who is blocking tankers from leaving the Persian Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz. Iran made an offer. Let's both of us open up Hormuz for 30 days. Trump said no. The Strait of Hormuz, right there. Every tanker must pass through the Strait of Hormuz to enter the Persian Gulf to fill up, or if it's filled up and been emptied, to leave. I'm sorry, to fill up. If it wants to enter the Persian Gulf through the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Oman to fill up inside the Persian Gulf, it must first go through the Strait of Hormuz. If it's all filled up inside the Persian Gulf and wants to go to the Arabian Sea, the Gulf of Oman, and the rest of the world, it has to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. And right there is Saudi Arabia, the big rat. They are the largest producer of oil in the Persian Gulf. Nobody comes close in the Persian Gulf. Right now, during this war, they produce 7.8 million barrels of oil per day. With the war going on, they are still able to produce 7.8 million barrels of oil a day. Would you like to guess which Persian Gulf state comes in second? I mean, you've got all these oil-rich states. You got Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, the UAE. Who do you think is the second largest producer of oil in the Persian Gulf during this war? Now remember, we fought 2 wars against Iraq, so they must have huge oil reserves, right? We fought one of those wars to protect Saudi Arabia and especially Kuwait. So we have 5 bases in Kuwait. Is it Kuwait? Which one is it? Well, it's a trick question. It's Iran. And there you have the struggle for geopolitical control of the Persian Gulf region. It's Saudi Arabia versus Iran. People will say, well, the Saudi Arabians are Sunni and Iran is predominantly Shiite, and that's what this is mostly about. This is 2 oil-producing juggernauts sipping from the Persian Gulf. So yes, they have some ideological differences, but they're also competing for dominance of the energy sector. Again, this is the entire Middle East, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Persian Gulf. Right now, during the war and the ceasefire, it's estimated that Saudi Arabia is producing, 7.8 million barrels of oil a day? Is that what I said? And Iran comes in second with a little more than 3 million barrels of oil a day. So Iran comes in second, but it's not even close to Saudi Arabia. Before the war, before February 28th, Iraq, up there, was the second largest producer of oil in the region. 4.3 million barrels a day. This is before February 28th. And Iran was at 4.1 million barrels a day. Iran and Iraq are both in second place, essentially. But once the war started, for some reason, Iran dominates Iraq in oil production. Iraq's production is way down because they can only move their oil through the Strait of Hormuz. There's the Strait of Hormuz. Now, 90% of Iran's oil is processed inside the Persian Gulf on Karg Island. But you got to get that oil out of Karg Island in the Persian Gulf. And you can see that Iran has access to the Arabian Sea without having to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. You see the Gulf of Oman? Iran has ports along the Gulf of Oman, meaning it doesn't have to pass through Hormuz for its oil to head out to Asia and the rest of the world. But they do have to deal with Trump's naval blockade. 4 Iranian flag tankers have been disabled this month by the U.S. Navy. Those tankers were trying to dock in Iranian ports along the Gulf coast of Oman. See that? Iran has shoreline, a lot of shoreline along the Gulf of Oman, which means they can sail out of the Gulf of Oman without having to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, but they have to deal with the American naval blockade. So that they, right? Okay. Saudi Arabia can also bypass the Strait of Hormuz, just like Iran. Saudi Arabia can move its oil through the Red Sea, either having it go out through the Suez Canal, which is north of the Red Sea, or south of the Red Sea. They could move their oil through the Bab el-Mandab Strait, which passes through Djibouti and Yemen. If the Houthis in Yemen block the Bab el-Mandab Strait, the Saudis theoretically could still use the Suez Canal by sending those tankers north. But the rest of the world would not be able to pass through the Suez Canal. Without the Bab el-Mandab Strait, the Suez Canal is useless to the entire world except Saudi Arabia. That is literally the lay of the land. Before this war, Iraq, Iran, and Saudi Arabia were the biggest oil producers in the Persian Gulf. Okay? That's the lay of the land. It's why we have so many military assets in the region to protect 55% of the world's known oil reserves. It's not about freedom. It's not about democracy. It's all about petroleum. In fact, if it were about freedom and democracy, that's what George W. Bush was selling when he did succeed in illegally invading in 2003. When he invaded Iraq, he said, we're spreading democracy and freedom to the Middle East. Donald Trump used the same con back on February 28th. We're decapitating the Iranian leadership so that the Iranian people can rise up. If this were about freedom, democratic freedom, well, Iran has way more democratic freedoms than Saudi Arabia. Iran overthrew overthrew the Shah. Now, they ultimately answer to the Ayatollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. That's Iran, and that's Saudi Arabia, and that's, where am I? Okay, I'm just showing you arrows here. Okay, let's move on. This is the president of Iran. Want to talk about freedom? Iran versus Saudi Arabia, who our ally would be if we were true adherents to the Enlightenment and our founding fathers. It would be Iran and not Saudi Arabia. This is the president of Iran, Mossad Pezeshkian, moderate. He was elected in July 2024 as a reformist. This is the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, Mohammad Bakr Kalibaf. He was also led the first peace delegation to Islamabad when we were talking to the Iranians. Iran has a parliament. That's why they have a speaker. And they have their supreme leader, Muqtada Khamenei. He is the current supreme leader of Iran. He was formally appointed on March 8th of this year after his daddy, the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed by U.S.-Israeli strikes on February 28th. Now, we haven't really seen, maybe we've heard from the current supreme leader. He is reportedly disfigured. He was severely injured by the airstrikes that killed his daddy. I am not going to defend the Iranian leadership. They massacre their protesters in the streets. So does this country. Iran is, though, more oppressive than our theocrats. That being said, not as oppressive as Saudi Arabia. And Iran has a functioning democracy with checks and balances that ultimately answers to its theocracy and Revolutionary Guard. It is ruled by religious autocrats who allow some protest, but not too much. Before the war, Iran had way more freedoms than our good ally, Saudi Arabia, which doesn't have presidential elections. Something like 50 million Iranians voted in the presidential elections 2 years ago. Saudi Arabia, no president, no presidential elections. To be fair, it does have a prime minister, and his name is Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. Nobody elected Mohammed bin Salman. He was appointed prime minister by Mohammed bin Salman. It's who you know, isn't it? It's always who you know. Saudi Arabia, our ally, our friend in the Middle East, remains one of the most authoritarian and repressive regimes in the world. But they sell us oil, and they strengthen the US dollar by only selling their oil to the world using the US dollar as its official currency. You pretty much can't buy Saudi oil unless you use the US dollar. That's good for the United States. And Saudi Arabia buys our federal government's debt. The United States government debt is $39 trillion. By the beginning of this summer, it will be $40 trillion. In order to keep paying the bills, our government has to issue interest-paying bonds. We're borrowing money and paying interest on it. We issue debt in order to keep the cash flow. Now, we could tax the rich, but no, we'd rather deficit finance this government, and that means selling bonds, treasury bonds, T-bills, savings bonds that baby boomers' grandmothers used to send you on your birthday. And we pay interest on those bonds to cover the $40 trillion debt, which Donald Trump is responsible for about 1/3 of. His tax cuts for the rich are responsible for about 1/3 of that $40 trillion debt. It's estimated that 10% of our annual budget goes towards paying interest on those bonds, interest on the debt, which the Saudis buy from us. The Saudis buy our debt, and so do the richest 1%. That's how it works. When you hear the word $40 trillion of debt, that means we've issued $40 trillion of bonds, savings bonds, treasury bills, and we have to pay interest on those bonds. It's not free money. It's like a credit card, basically, but we don't pay the kind of interest on the bonds that we have to pay Visa. It's a little different. Not only that, the Saudis, they trade oil using the dollar. They buy a lot of our debt. They've also, the Saudis, given Jared Kushner's private equity firm, Affinity Partners, that's the name. The Saudis gave Jared Kushner $2 billion to invest for them right after Donald Trump left office the first time. And because private equity firms are a scam, Jared skims off the top of that $2 billion by taking what are called management fees. It's estimated that Jared Kushner, who belongs in prison, he skims about $25 million a year off the top of that $2 billion that Saudi Arabia gave him to invest. He just takes $25 million off the top each year in management fees, and then he gets a percentage of any future profits. Now, for a couple of years during the Biden administration, that money was just sitting there. Ron Wyden, who was chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, launched an investigation into this, and they said, wait a second. Saudi Arabia gave Affinity Partners, Jared Kushner's private equity firm, $2 billion, and it's just sitting there, basically parked in a money market fund, collecting like 0.03%. Ron Wyden said, why would the Saudis give Jared Kushner $2 billion? He's collecting $25 million a year in management fees, and he's doing nothing with the $2 billion. He's not investing it. The New York Times reported in March of this year, Kushner, after about 3 or 4 years, has finally begun investing some of that money. But we don't know what kind of profits he's making for Saudi Arabia. We just know he's making at least $25 million a year off the top of their $2 billion investment. So far, from what we know, Saudi Arabia's $2 billion investment with Jared Kushner, who belongs in prison, so far that $2 billion investment has returned nothing to Saudi Arabia. So he's moving the money, he's moving some of that money, he's making some investments, but Saudi Arabia hasn't seen any of it. According to the latest reports, as I said, Jared is beginning to make some investments. But since he got the money from Saudi Arabia, his total in management fees and skimming off the bottom and the top, $150 million from Saudi Arabia. In other words, they gave him $2 billion, and he ended up with $150 million. He pocketed $150 million in 3 or 4 years in management fees and little skims off that $2 billion. And Saudi Arabia has gotten nothing in return. In March of this year, the New York Times reported that in the middle of this Iran war, Trump's peace envoy, Jared Kushner, was not just flying around the Middle East to broker a deal with Iran. At the same time, he was also actively pursuing Middle Eastern nations, Persian Gulf states, asking them to invest an additional $5 billion in Affinity Partners, his private equity firm. Saudi Arabia, 3 or 4 years ago, gave him $2 billion. Other countries in the Persian Gulf gave him a couple of $1 billion. And now he wants another round of funding. He wants $5 billion more for Affinity Partners. This while he's traveling to Qatar, to Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, trying to strike a peace deal with Iran and trying to add to the Abraham Accords so that more Persian Gulf states recognize Israel. This is so outrageous, and I'm often accused by some listeners of rhetorical hyperbole, overstating the truth. Well, I ask you to correct me. I do. And I issue corrections. I am not overstating the truth when I insist Jared Kushner should end up in prison just like his father did. His father, who's now the ambassador to both Monaco and France, although France wants to send him home, Jared Kushner's father did time in prison for witness tampering, hiring a prostitute to visit his brother-in-law and videotape his brother-in-law allegedly having sex with a prostitute and then sending the video of his brother-in-law having sex with a prostitute to his sister. Jared Kushner's father allegedly sent a video of her to his sister of her husband having sex with a prostitute. That would be, and he went to prison. Chris Christie prosecuted Jared Kushner's father. Very good people. These are good people. You know, they say women only marry their fathers. Ivanka should have married Charles Kushner. The father, I think he's closer to Donald, but Jared's pretty close. He's a snake. He's sneaky. He's quiet. Always beware of the quiet ones. So this is from the New York Times. This is from March 13th of this year. You tell me if Jared Kushner doesn't belong in prison. You tell me. This article was, or at least put on trial. This was written by Rob Copeland and Maureen Farrell from the New York Times, March 13th. Jared Kushner solicits funds for his firm while working as Mideast envoy. President Trump's son-in-law is trying to raise $5 billion or more from foreign governments and others for his private equity firm. Let me read to you from the New York Times. Mr. Kushner's fundraising is expected to stretch on for the better part of this year. The efforts show the blurring of the lines between public service. Public service? What has he done for us? Public service and private profit-seeking during Mr. Trump's second term. Only a few weeks ago, in his role as Mr. Trump's peace envoy, Mr. Kushner met in Geneva with Iran's foreign minister. The U.S. and Israeli bombing campaign in Iran began shortly after those meetings concluded without a deal on Iran's nuclear program. Mr. Kushner, 45, also spearheaded the Trump administration's successful efforts to extract hostages from Gaza and negotiated between Russia and Ukraine in an attempt to end their war. Well, he's failed at negotiating peace between Russia and Ukraine, and the Trump administration's successful efforts to extract hostages from Gaza, how long did that take? How is that considered a success? In the 2024 presidential campaign, that would be 2 years ago, Kushner insisted, I'm no longer involved with Trump. or his plans for the Oval Office. If he gets elected, this won't be anything like the first Trump administration. By then, this was during the Biden administration, 2024, Kushner had already raised billions from Saudi Arabia and other Persian Gulf states. And he gave interviews in the lead up to the 2024 presidential election, insisting there will be no conflict of interest should my father-in-law, Donald Trump, if he defeats Kamala Harris. There'll be no conflict of interest because I won't be working in his new White House the way I did during the first administration. And more importantly, I won't be soliciting any sovereign wealth funds for investments in the foreseeable future. I've got enough money at Affinity that I don't need more investing. From the New York Times, let's go big. As recently as December 2024, this was after Trump won, Mr. Kushner suggested that he would not seek more money for Affinity during Mr. Trump's second term. That month, he told the podcaster Patrick O'Shaughnessy that he would preemptively try to avoid any conflict. Mr. Kushner added, "We don't have to raise capital for the next 4 years." That appears to have changed. In materials provided to potential investors this year and reviewed by the New York Times, Affinity indicated that more than 3/4 of the roughly $5 billion it had raised since its founding had already been spent. Okay, so he's trying to raise more money. So he's already got $5 billion, hasn't invested a little of it, but now he's hitting up Persian Gulf states for more money. And he made, how much did he make so far from, what's the number here? $150 million in management fees. Just from the $2 billion he got from Saudi Arabia. So he must have made $300 million from all the other Persian Gulf countries that chipped in to Affinity Partners. And now he wants more money, more management fees. Well, here is Donald Trump with reporters on Monday explaining why negotiations broke down with Iran. Well, you sent your son to Islamabad, but here is Donald Trump explaining why the ceasefire is on life support.
I say, you're crazy. You're crazy people. You're nuts. You're not having a nuclear weapon. They think they can talk me into it, and they don't do very well with it. But they know how I feel. They can't have a nuclear weapon. They would use it within an hour after getting it. If the Obama deal wasn't terminated by me, they would have had it 6 years ago.
Okay, so I know that he's a merchant of chaos and people can't keep track of all his lies. He's saying that the Obama deal was the worst thing imaginable, and they would have had, if I didn't get us out of the nuclear deal that Obama signed, they would have had a nuclear weapon already. Okay. Trump, so let me just help you out here, just to remind you. You all know this, but let's go over the facts. Trump withdrew from the Iran deal in May of 2018. He was sworn in January of 2017. Within a year, on May of 2018, he tore up the Iran deal. Now, these are the facts. The media can't give you facts because they're hanging on Donald Trump's every lie. So let me give you the facts. Iran was fully compliant with the 2015 Iran nuclear deal before Trump withdrew the United States on May 8th, 2018. In 2015, there was the Iran nuclear deal that Barack Obama orchestrated. It was signed by Iran, the EU, the United Kingdom, Russia, China. Everybody signed it. And the deal was that Iran would give up its nuclear weapons ambitions, and we would give Iran back its money, some of its money. We would unfreeze some assets and give them the money that belongs to them. Okay? Write this down. I keep track of this stuff. So that deal, which Donald Trump said was the worst deal in the history of deal making, signed in 2015. Trump gets elected in 2016, becomes president in 2017. A year later, May 8th, 2018, withdraws from the deal. Now, he didn't kill the deal. There was still a deal, but the U.S. wasn't participating in it. The International Atomic Energy Agency, according to the deal that Obama signed, that is the independent body that did the inspections after the deal was signed. They're with the UN. And the International Atomic Energy Agency certified Iran's total compliance with the deal from the time that deal went into effect. Implementation day is what they call it, January 16th, 2016. Obama signed the deal in 2015. Implementation of the deal was January 16th, 2016. And that's when the New Hampshire primaries, I think the Iowa caucuses had already taken place, and Trump is running against the deal because it's fresh, it's in the news, it's the dumbest thing ever. He doesn't care what the truth is. I got something to run on. It's a deal. I'm a deal maker. I'll make better deals. We know, and you can just Google these are the facts. The International Atomic Energy Agency, tasked with inspections, spot inspections, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, was doing spot inspections with no heads up. We can't even do that with ICE. Congress can't even do that with ICE. The UN was doing weapons inspectors. We're not telling Iran when we were going to inspect their nuclear facilities. And the inspectors certified Iran's total and complete compliance with the deal from the time it went into effect throughout every quarter, even after early May of 2018 when Trump tore up the deal. So when Trump tore up the deal, Iran was in total compliance with it. It wasn't enriching uranium past 3%. You get it up to 90%, it's weapons grade. They kept it at 3%. It wasn't really until last year, 7 years after Trump tore the deal up, that Iran began messing with inspectors and it began enriching uranium way past 3%. It's believed they've gotten up to about 65%. Now, I know Trump and the Republicans and Sean Hannity try to confuse you. So people say, stop repeating. We get it. You know what? Then don't listen to the show. If you think I repeat stuff too much, go listen to another show because most people are confused by this. We're not as smart as you who think I repeat things over and over again. So go watch somebody else's show. Trump kills the deal in 2018. Iran still allows UN inspectors. A year after Trump killed the deal, this is 2019, Iran enriched uranium up to 4.5%. So they were signaling, well, there's no deal, there's no treaty, we're going to bump it up a little to 4.5%. Within a year and a half of Trump tearing up the Iran deal, the United States reimposed economic sanctions on Iran. Now, the sanctions, some of the sanctions had been lifted by Obama in 2015 or 2016 when the deal was implemented. The deal was, we'll give you back some of your money, some of your assets that have been frozen, and we'll lift some economic sanctions. And Trump tears up the deal and reimposes the sanctions. It took until 2021 for Iran to get up to 65% enrichment of its uranium. So that would be nearly 4 years after Trump tore up the deal and reimposed economic sanctions. By then, the deal was dead. There were still inspections. They were still kind of letting the UN inspectors in, but their feeling was, why should we be allowing inspectors in when there's no deal? They didn't violate. The lie is that they violated the 2015 deal that Obama signed. They never violated it. Trump, you can't violate a deal that was torn up by Trump, who then reimposed sanctions. So eventually Iran, and I'm not defending Iran, they're going to say, if there's no treaty, there's nothing to adhere to. And it really wasn't until before June of last year when Iran began truly messing with the inspectors. By May of last year, Grassi, who does the inspections for the UN, said, well, they're not being fully compliant with the inspections agreement that no longer exists because Trump tore it up. This isn't about nuclear weapons. It has zero to do with Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Iran doesn't want a nuclear weapons program. We know that. I'm a broken record on this. We know they gave up their nuclear weapons program in 2003. They're not interested. Here is Trump, though, because people including me, don't understand nuclear power or uranium enrichment. If you're a signatory to the non-proliferation agreement, which I don't know, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it's like 190 countries around the world have signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which means you can enrich uranium up to 3%. Iran signed that deal in 1970. They are legally allowed to enrich uranium. They just can't enrich it past about 3.5%. That's the deal every country has signed. Every country has enriched uranium. They've just signed a treaty not to bring it up to 90% where it becomes weapons grade. But we don't understand that. What did I get? I didn't even get an F in chemistry. I got like an H. They didn't have a grade low enough to give me in chemistry. So we're all terrified of nuclear power, which we should be. It would be great if this stuff never came into our universe. But it's great for politics. It's great for scaring Americans. Here's Trump lying, claiming that we need to be terrified of Iran. The thought of Iran getting their hands on a nuclear weapon should be the most terrifying thing you ever hear. Why is that, Donald Trump?
And they would have used it immediately on Israel and also the rest of the Middle East.
They would have, if they got their hands on a nuclear weapon, they would have used it immediately. I went over this before. I'm going over it again because it really pisses me off. Nobody's detonating a nuclear weapon, period, except the United States in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, or 3 Mile Island by accident, or Chernobyl by accident. Those were more like dirty bombs. Nobody's detonating a nuclear weapon. Nobody's dropping a nuclear bomb on Israel. Listen to me. Nobody is dropping a nuclear bomb on Israel. Nobody. Why? 20% of Israel is Muslim, and some Christians, but mostly Muslim. The West Bank, Gaza, southern Lebanon, look at the map. They would all become radioactive. Where are you going to drop a bomb, a nuclear bomb in Israel without it spreading to Egypt, Jordan, Gaza, Iraq, and Iran? Where are you going to drop it? And of course, southern Lebanon, where Hezbollah is located. Nobody is dropping a nuclear bomb on Israel. Iran doesn't need a nuclear weapon. All they have to do is close the Strait of Hormuz. They've shown us they have a nuclear option. It just doesn't involve uranium. It's Hormuz. Abraham Rezai is the spokesman for Iran's National Security and Foreign Policy Commission. He is working inside the Iranian parliament. And as Trump says, the truce is on life support. It's got a 1% chance of living. Well, Abraham Rezai warned that one of the many ways Iran will retaliate if and when Trump decides to start bombing again, the way we're going to retaliate, said Abraham Rezai, is we will then enrich uranium up to 90%, and 90% is weapons grade. They've gone up, we think, to about 60, 65% after 4 years after Trump tore up the treaty. They were obeying, they were compliant with the treaty. But Trump needed something to run on. The treaty goes into effect in January of 2016. Trump needed something to run on, so he ran against the treaty. The Obama treaty. Doesn't matter if it's true, needs something to run on. So now Iran is threatening to enrich uranium up to 90%, which is in violation of the Non-Proliferation Treaty that Iran signed in 1970. But they, again, were fully compliant until Trump tore up the deal. Again, it took Iran several years after Trump tore up Obama's Iran deal, took several more years for Iran to get to 65%. And now there's nothing to stop them from getting up to 90%. There's absolutely nothing we can do to stop Iran from enriching uranium up to 90%. To get weapons grade. Nothing. Nothing. Here's what Trump doesn't understand, though. Even if Iran gets up to 90%, even if they get a nuclear weapon, Benjamin Netanyahu is still going to be at war with Iran. It's not like Iran gets a nuclear weapon and all of a sudden Benjamin Netanyahu goes, okay, somebody else, we got to fight somebody else. They have a nuclear weapon, can't fight them. This is one of the great lies. The building block of this war and the war in Iraq is once a country gets a nuclear bomb, you can't attack them because they'll use a nuclear weapon. Okay, so let's untangle this for a second. Let's use our effing heads, America. Let's employ a little critical thinking, okay? Israel has a nuclear bomb. It's had one since 1967. The United States has a nuclear bomb. Iran getting a nuclear bomb won't protect them from an attack, especially from Israel. Israel has been a nuclear power since 1967. Since 2023, since October 7th, 2023, 40,000 rockets. I want to put my fist through the camera right now. I'm so angry at the stupidity. I mean, I hate having our intelligence insulted this way. But you've got most Americans who are even against the war saying, oh, we can't have Iran get a nuclear weapon because then they can do whatever they want. I want to put this is why I have tremendous back pain because I have so much repressed anger over this, over the stupidity that Donald Trump can tell these lies because most Americans and the media doesn't pay attention. Okay. Israel, I just had to calm down. I was thinking about my soup. I'm making another bean soup. And I wish I could give all of you my bean soup. Israel, nuclear power since 1967. Since 2023, 40,000 rockets have been fired into Israel. Not drones, rockets. Where they've come from. Gaza, southern Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Iran. I fired a couple of missiles on the 4th of July. Everybody gets to bomb Israel and I don't? 40,000 rockets fired into Israel. But I thought if you have a nuclear bomb, nobody will attack you. Israel is the only nuclear power in the Middle East. And in fewer than 3 years, 40,000 rockets fired into Israel by Yemen, Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah. I thought once a country has a nuclear weapon, nobody can attack them. For example, after 9/11, we didn't drop a nuclear bomb on Iraq and Afghanistan. They were behind the attacks, but we didn't drop a nuclear bomb. We didn't even invade Iraq or Afghanistan after 9/11 because they had nuclear bombs, so we couldn't attack them. Oh, wait. Iraq and Afghanistan didn't attack us on 9/11. They don't have nuclear bombs. We do. If you have a nuclear bomb, nobody can attack you. What happened? Just having the nuclear bomb didn't prevent 9/11 from non-nuclear countries. Israel has had a nuclear bomb since 1967. How many rockets fired? 40,000 rockets in fewer than 3 years from non-nuclear powers. Well, who was behind 9/11? Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. Now, Saudi Arabia doesn't have a nuclear weapon, but their princes attacked us anyway. They funded it. Weren't they afraid we would nuke Saudi Arabia? Pakistan does have a nuclear bomb. But we're not going to drop a nuclear bomb on Pakistan because the radioactivity would spread to India, China, the Middle East. See how it works? It would also spread to Russia. And they have maybe more nuclear warheads than we do. This is Russia. It has thousands of nuclear warheads. This is Ukraine. You see Ukraine all the way over there? Ukraine gave up all its nuclear weapons after the Soviet Union fell. But that doesn't stop Ukraine from consistently sending drones and ballistic missiles into Russia, hitting Moscow, shutting down airports. This idea that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon because then they can do whatever they want and there's nothing to stop them is complete nonsense. It's an illogical fallacy designed to keep spending trillions and trillions of dollars on weapons we don't need. Here is Trump trying to scare Americans yesterday about Iran having a nuclear weapon, and here he gives up the whole. He's so stupid.
You saw that when they started shooting rockets. Nobody thought Saudi Arabia and Qatar and UAE were going to get hit, or Kuwait, Bahrain.
Nobody saw. Nobody saw it. Nobody saw it. We didn't see the Strait of Hormuz being shut down. Nobody thought neighboring Persian Gulf states would get hit. Nobody. So that's why practically all our bases are uninhabitable in the Persian Gulf. That's why 14 soldiers are dead, more than 300 wounded, billions and billions of dollars worth of military assets in the Persian Gulf destroyed, because nobody thought Iran would fire retaliatory strikes at our embassy in Riyadh and all those Yes, they did. You didn't think they would do it. You were totally unprepared for February 28th. Everyone knew Iran would hit back. Everyone knew they would close Hormuz. You repeatedly said nobody ever thought they would close Hormuz. Everyone told you before you did this, they're going to close Hormuz and they're going to retaliate, and we don't have enough munitions and we can't do it alone. Here is Trump, one moment of clarity, realizing he gave away the store. I just told everybody I'm an idiot. Nobody thought they would bomb all our military bases and destroy all our military bases in the Persian Gulf. He's keeping a lid on this story. CNN, Washington Post, The Guardian, New York Times aren't. They destroyed practically all our military bases in the Persian Gulf because he and Hegseth were totally unprepared for February 28th. Trump says he's going to ease pain at the pump by temporarily eliminating the federal gas tax, which comes to 18 cents a gallon for regular gas, 24 cents a gallon for diesel. Since February 28th, prices are up about 50% for gas since the war started. Axios reporting that Trump will need congressional support to lift the tax on diesel and gas. John Thune is Senate Majority Leader, and he's warning that he is not too keen on lifting the 18-cent gas tax. He said that's what funds the Highway Trust Fund. So when you get rid of the 18-cent gas tax, the highways can't be repaired. John Thune, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican, said something really interesting. He said, quote, "The best thing that can happen for gas prices is for the Strait of Hormuz to get opened up again." Yeah, but that's not the best thing that can happen for the people who put Donald Trump into office. The oil companies, Shell, doubled their profits after the war started. I went over this. You see, Aramco, the Saudi Arabian oil company, huge profits. Chuck Schumer is the minority leader in the Senate. By the way, I think there may be a chance he becomes majority leader. I think with all this gerrymandering, that's only for the House of Representatives. We're ignoring the possibility that there's going to be a massive blue wave, and you cannot gerrymander the Senate. It's already been gerrymandered by our founding fathers to make sure the wrong people get 2 senators. But who knows? I'm seeing some polling, keeping my mouth shut on this, but while we're so focused on the gerrymandering in the House of Representatives, the Democrats may actually, maybe, who knows, may win the Senate, maybe lose, and all they need is one chamber. And Donald Trump. It's over for Donald Trump. Chuck Schumer said, let's not pretend 18 cents of gas tax relief per gallon makes up for the damage Trump created with this war. Schumer went on to say 18 cents isn't $1.50, which is how much the price of gas has gone up since this war started. Schumer then went on to say the best way to lower costs is to end this illegal war. Trump, for the time being, is keeping Hormuz closed. Eventually, he's got to open it, but right now, Putin and the oil companies love it. Last week, I reported Shell's profits doubled since the war began. Saudi Arabia's national oil company, Aramco, reported $13 billion in profits since the war started on February 28th. That's a 25% increase over the same quarter a year ago. Now, Saudi Arabia, I showed you the maps. Saudi Arabia has access to the Red Sea. And so it's been relying on pipelines to take oil from the Persian Gulf to the east and moving it west through pipes towards ports on the Red Sea. Problem is, pipes are not as efficient as tankers. Take a look at these tankers. They're almost a miracle. They defy physics. Pipelines are not as efficient as tankers. The CEO of the Saudi-owned oil company Aramco said since Hormuz closed, the world is losing about 100 million barrels of oil each week. 1.4 billion people live in India. The Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is a conservative authoritarian. Trump used to like him. And Modi is now doing something we would never hear in the United States, or at least not since Jimmy Carter. Modi is telling Indians to conserve fuel and fertilizer. Imagine that, conservation. Modi is telling Indian citizens the best thing they can do right now is to work from home and save gas by not commuting to work. Modi is also telling farmers to give up on diesel. A lot of the water pumps used on farms, they use diesel to power the water pumps. Modi is saying switch to solar-powered water pumps. Imagine Donald Trump saying that. This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. Please hit the like button right now so I remain in your feed. Hit the notification bell. Subscribe to this channel and my newsletter by going to davidfeldmanshow.com. I will not, you need to give me your email address. I promise you I won't, unlike certain Democratic politicians, I don't sell my email list, and I respect your inbox. I will only send something to you if it's important. Texas held its primaries, I believe it was back in March, right? But there are runoff elections at the end of this month. You got Paxton, the attorney general, running against Cornyn for the Republican nomination. Neither one of them got 50%. So at the end of the month, they're going to have a runoff. Paxton is the Texas attorney general. He's quitting that job to run for Senate. So Chip Roy, the congressman, is giving up his seat in the House of Representatives, and he's running for state attorney general. And all three of those men are trying to prove they're more Islamophobic than anybody. Here is Chip Roy on Fox News coming out against Epic City. We've discussed Epic City. It's a planned community for Muslims in Texas. Chip Roy says Epic City will push Sharia law on everyone in Texas, and that means white women getting raped. That's Sharia law is a dog whistle for Muslims raping white women.
Congressman, there's a lot about this. It's kind of murky and unclear. But an Islamic-centered city in Texas, what could possibly be wrong with this?
An Islamic-centered city in Texas. Now, it's all right for Pete Hegseth to live in a Christian community in Tennessee, which has its own judges and enforces its own criminal code under Christian law, but not Christian law as outlined by Pastor Doug. Okay, so Epic City they're now calling it the Meadow. It's 402 acres. It would be about, 30 minutes out of Dallas, and 1,000 homes, a large mosque, a community center, K through 12, faith-based Islamic school. It would have a community college, retail shops, parks. It would be open to residents of all faiths. But they're describing it as a thriving ecosystem built around Islamic values. Well, the First Amendment protects that. You can build a religious community for like-minded people as long as you allow people who aren't co-religionists into your community. So they are using this in Texas to trash Muslims. And political consultants in Texas have said openly, Muslims are, it's their turn. They said, we've gone after gays, we've gone after the trans community, we've gone after blacks. It's literally it's time for us to trash Muslims. And you got Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Paxton Cornyn. They're all suing to block Epic City because we can't have a Muslim-themed community.
Well, a friend of ours in a suburban red county here in Texas, they did a poll in their elementary school, said what language is spoken at home. English came in fourth. Spanish was number one. Farsi was number two. Other languages number three, and English number four. This is what we're dealing with in Texas right now.
What we're dealing with right now in Texas is students getting an education, getting out of their head, learning other languages. This is Joel Webbin from Texas. He's a pastor and Christian nationalist, and he is the founder of Right Response Ministries, and he is opposed to Epic City. He wants to ban mosques. He doesn't want any mosques allowed in Texas, and he is a Christian nationalist. This is his latest tweet. I found this through Right Wing Watch. The young men are waking up. Women will learn to have a quiet and gentle spirit, or they will learn to be alone. Deus vult, meaning God wills it. How did we learn that? Who taught us that Deus vult means God wills it? Pete Hegseth, our Christian nationalist defense chief, who has a tattoo. Among his many neo-Nazi tattoos, one of them is Deus vult, God wills it. This was chanted by the Crusaders when they were massacring Muslims in the Holy Land, Deus vult, and it's become a neo-Nazi slogan, Deus vult. Women, says the pastor, must have to learn to have a quiet spirit because we're sick of paying them $75,000 to shut up about these rape allegations. That's basically Deus vult. That's basically the message. women. So these people, Pastor Doug, who runs Pete Hegseth's religious community in Tennessee, has openly said that women and Muslims should not be allowed to vote. He has said democracy doesn't work. These are the core values of Pastor Doug Wilson, that the Confederacy was better because it was Christian-based, and that slavery was mutual affection between slaveholders and slaves. This is what these people believe, and you gotta listen to them. Right Wing Watch found this. This is Pastor, what's his name? Joel Webbin. He's a Texas pastor. He is a racist. He told white parents to give their kids the talk, warning them that blacks are 30 times more likely to hurt you than white people. He calls slavery a blessing for black Americans because they never would have discovered Christianity. That's what he believes. Here he is, Right Wing Watch, or White Wing Watch, found him talking.
Like I just think so long as we have democracy coupled with universal suffrage, you will constantly be going against the grain. You're constantly going to have half of the population voting for temperance, tolerance.
Yes, you can't.
Suicidal empathy.
Suicidal empathy. Universal suffrage, meaning everybody being allowed to vote, is going to result in suicidal empathy. And he's a Christian. And we know what Christ thought about empathy for others, right? This is what they believe.
My point, I guess, is that I don't think you're going to get people to vote away democracy.
Yeah. So how do you get rid of democracy? He's saying, I don't believe in democracy. This is what they don't say out loud, but this is what they believe. They don't hate Washington, D.C. They hate our founding fathers. They hate the idea of people voting. You cannot trust the American people to make wise decisions. And he says, we're not going to vote away our democratic freedoms. Well, I don't know. You know, Trump got elected using dog whistles to say, vote for me and you'll be less free. More from Pastor Webbins.
But my point is that I'm agreeing with you. I think that it has to be taken. I think that men, virtuous, ambitious, masculine men, have to climb the ladder of power and forcefully take away from the people that which is their detriment.
Take away, strong masculine men have to take away from the people that which is their detriment. You cannot trust the American people with democracy. That is what Pete Hegseth believes. That's what Pastor Doug believes. This is not rhetorical hyperbole. We've been over this. They do not believe in democracy. And you see, there are people sitting on the Supreme Court who do not believe everyone should vote. And I have had conversations with my liberal, democratic, Harvard-educated, Ivy League-educated friends. And these liberal democratic douchebags, I've asked them, do you believe in universal suffrage? And they say, well, not everybody should vote. Not everybody is smart enough to vote. So one of the conversations we need to have is, how much democracy do you believe in? There are a lot of Democrats who don't believe in too much democracy. The professional managerial class, the lawyers, the doctors, the hyper-educated children of the upper middle class. They go to private schools. They don't believe everyone is entitled to the vote. They don't believe in democracy. Here is Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski. Defense Appropriations Committee they were going over the budget for defense appropriations. On Tuesday, Pete Hegseth was asked about a war powers resolution. Here is Lisa Murkowski gently asking Pete Hegseth about the war powers resolution, which by law needed to be introduced by May 1st.
An authorization of use of military force. I understand that the administration has made clear that you believe that the actions taken thus far fall under the President's Article 2 authority. I think reasonable people have disagreed about the boundaries of presidential war powers for a long time. But the War Powers Resolution is pretty clear here. It requires the President to terminate hostilities within 60 days, absent congressional authorization. I think it's important that we in Congress actually assert our own role and responsibility to this. That 60-day clock expired April 28th. And then on the 1st, the administration sent letters to congressional leaders asserting that the hostilities has ended. But I think where there is confusion is when the president says hostilities have ended, we still have 15,000 troops that are forward deployed, more than 20 warships in an active naval blockade. CENTCOM has redirected 61 commercial vessels, disabled tankers. In other words, it doesn't appear that hostilities have ended. And so the question to you is whether or not the administration has considered or had intended to seek an authorization of use of military force from the Congress.
Senator, our view is that should the president make the decision to recommence, that we would have all the authorities necessary to do so.
Do you think that it would be helpful to the president if it was made clear that in fact the Congress did provide an AUMF?
I think the president, our view is that he has all the authorities he needs under Article 2.
You don't need the War Powers Act, unconstitutional, according to Pete Hegseth. Article 2 of the Constitution spells out what the president can and can't do. And according to Pete Hegseth, even though the Constitution says war powers are Article 1, only Congress can declare war, Pete Hegseth, a fascist who doesn't believe in democracy, just said, we believe Article 2 gives the president all the power to decide when and if we go to war. By the way, anybody who says AUMF is your enemy, any politician who says AUMF is an MFer. Authorized use of military force. That's what it means. In order to invade Iraq, George W. Bush got an authorized use of military force, AUMF. In order to fight Afghanistan, which didn't attack us on 9/11, George W. Bush got an authorized use of military force to fight a war on global terror, which is still in effect. Congress continues to renew that authorized use of military force to fight a global war on terror, which Hegseth uses as the excuse to do extrajudicial illegal bombing campaigns in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. He's saying we have the authority to do that based on this 25-year-old authorized use of military force to fight a global war on terror that was passed in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. So Senator Murkowski, when she says AUMF, you are an MFer. To glibly refer to that, which is essentially a war declaration where our men and women come home, if they're lucky, wounded, PTSD, some without faces, some without, and you glibly call it an AUMF? Those are declarations of war, you MF. That's your attempt to keep the American people out of the process, because most people don't know what an AUMF means, you MFer. That's what they do. They try to make you feel stupid. So you go, AUMF, I guess, all of these people. Okay. Well, Article 2 of the Constitution spells out all the responsibilities of the president. He does not have war powers. It's Congress. And the War Powers Act says you can go 60 days, have your war. After 60 days, you have to get a authorized use of military force, a war authorization from Congress, or it's against the law. But we got geniuses like Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump fighting this war that's going so well. Let's go back to Trey Yingst from Fox News. You just got off the phone again with Donald Trump. How's the war going?
U.S. pressure that continues as part of the American blockade of Iranian ports. President Trump called that blockade the greatest military maneuver in history.
The greatest. Starving millions of people, increasing gas prices 50%, the greatest military move. What is this military? Other than the oil companies and Vladimir Putin getting record profits, here is Sebastian Gorka. He currently works in the White House as deputy assistant to the president. He's the senior director of counterterrorism at the National Security Council. He is the counterterrorism czar. Here he is on News Nation, I believe it was Sunday, being asked, well, what's the timetable here? Donald Trump told us this war was going to last a week, then 4 weeks. What's going on? Here is Sebastian Gorka saying, the reason the war is lasting so long is we did too good a job.
We did hear a much shorter time frame at the beginning of this, right? Was this an optimistic take, or how do we reconcile the original timeline with what we're dealing with now?
Well, look, there is the ancient aphorism, every plan lasts until first contact with the enemy. But there is a very simple answer to your question. We've just been too effective, along with our colleagues in Jerusalem that have effected numerous persona strikes. We have absolutely destroyed the leadership, the traditional leadership. Take this one metric, Chris. Where is this vaunted new Ayatollah? Where is Mojtaba? Oh, really? Is he in charge? How come we haven't seen hide nor hair of him? Not one still photograph, let alone a video statement. This is a regime in ultimate collapse at the top. As a result, it makes communicating and getting that final deal, that acquiescence, that surrender, a little bit more complicated, but rest assured, it is coming imminently.
So go take Hormuz, Gorka. If the leadership is fractured, you've decapitated them and they're powerless, go take Hormuz. Go in and take the uranium if they're so powerless. That's just a talking point they came up with. Trump doesn't want to make a deal because he can't get a deal as good as Obama's, and he wants to keep Hormuz closed for as long as possible for the oil companies and Putin. And, you know, he'll do it until he'll do it for another 3 months. He'll keep Hormuz shut for another 3 months. And the oil companies will have gotten their money's worth out of him. And this idea that we've decapitated their leadership, so they don't know who to deal with. The Iranian leadership is not a cult of personality. It's a bureaucracy. They've been set up since 1979 for this eventuality. You can decapitate Hezbollah the way Netanyahu did. They regroup. They get new leaders. They're decentralized. The Iranian leadership is decentralized. It's kind of like a states' rights kind of thing. All the power is not vested in one human being. Other people can do each other's jobs. Nobody is irreplaceable. As Charles de Gaulle famously said at a graveyard filled with soldiers, he says, "This place is filled with indispensable men." He pointed to all the generals, and he said, all of these people were indispensable. We couldn't win the war without them. Well, they died during the war, and somehow we were able to. There's no such thing as an indispensable leader, unless you're a fascist and you want to and you believe in cults of personality, which Gorka does, Trump does. They want us to believe that the Ayatollah Khamenei and Khomeini and Khamenei's son, that they are the fascistic leaders of Iran. Well, they did have, or do have, way too much autocratic theological power, but everybody's replaceable. You can keep killing the leadership, more people will bubble up to the surface. So Trump isn't worried about this war. He's worried about the Great Replacement. He's worried about white people becoming minorities. He says we need more people in the United States who are white. We don't want people of color. That's what the whole thing with ICE is about and the deportations. He's right now encouraging white Afrikaners to seek political asylum here in the United States because they're white. He's encouraging them to claim some phony, non-existent political persecution, that their farms are being taken from them in South Africa. They're not. But it's an opportunity for Trump to bring more white people into the United States. And yesterday, he unveiled new plans to make white Christian America more fertile. I've been over this. We need the migrants. We have a population implosion. We're not replacing. More people are dying than being born in the United States. It's why Springfield, Ohio brought in all those Haitians. They need workers. I've been over this. And the Republicans know this. Farmers are complaining, we don't have enough people. Well, you have to balance racism with economics. And Trump is trying to straddle this divide with fertility. Monday was Fertility Day, where Trump's fertility advisors all gathered in the Oval Office to explain all their new government initiatives to get more white Christian women pregnant. Here is Dr. Oz. He's in charge. He's in charge of Medicare and Medicaid under Bobby Kennedy. He's telling us what the White House is doing to increase fertility.
They're private companies who are now taking advantage of the whole group of individuals who can get access to fertility medications and the treatments that go with them. And as the services get better, we make them more affordable, we'll have more Trump babies.
Yeah, and we hope that
yes, more Trump babies. We're going to get more Trump babies. They're calling them Trump babies. Oh my God, here is more from Donald Trump and Dr. Oz explaining how we're going to get more Trump babies.
Okay, go ahead.
So let me speak a little bit about the reality that 1 in 3 Americans are underbabied.
Underbabied. 1 in 3 Americans are underbabied. What does
underbabied mean?
Yes, what does underbabied mean? Like underbaby? Like Donald Trump's diaper? That's under a baby. What does underbabied mean, Dr. Oz?
That means that you either don't have any children or you have less children than you would normally want to have.
Right. So, most people are deciding not to have babies because this planet's going to be uninhabitable, and we have plenty of people at the border. They're just not white. Go on.
We have a crisis that's causing our fertility rate to drop below 1.5. The replacement rate is 2.1. So we're way below what we need just to replace the people that we have in America.
Well, he's playing fast and loose with the statistics. He's talking about the replacement rate for white Europeans. That's what they're worried about. So this is the great replacement theory writ large. You are seeing now an effort to battle the great replacement, which is this is an actual theory that Tucker Carlson and the Republicans subscribe to, that the Jews in America and Europe are encouraging more Muslims, more people of color to flood the borders to destroy the white race. Here is Dr. Bobby Kennedy. Is he a doctor? Sounds like a doctor. Here's Dr. Bobby Kennedy. Watch Trump's face when Bobby starts talking about sperm counts.
For men in 1970, men had twice the sperm count as our teenagers do today.
Men have twice the sperm count as our teenagers do today. Watch Trump listening to Bobby Kennedy.
For men in 1970, men had twice the sperm count as our teenagers do today.
Based on what? Laptops? The keyboards on laptops, you count. Who's counting the sperm? Well, Trump is looking at him going, oh boy. All right, that's Bobby. Trump has his own solutions, not just fertility. Here is John Roberts of Fox News, fresh off the phone with Donald Trump.
I was talking to the president this morning. It was just before the Oval Office event. He kind of surprised me a little bit because he said, John, I just want to tell you, I'm very serious about this. So you can talk about this. I'm serious about beginning a process to make Venezuela the 51st state.
Does he know that Venezuela is Spanish speaking? That the people from Venezuela aren't the people you want in our country? Canada, which used to be a white country, that he thinks Canada is still a white country. All right. Here is Kevin Hastert. He's Trump's National Economic Council director. And here he is yesterday bragging about the new job numbers, which came in. And he says these job numbers are so much better than Joe Biden's. Well, they're not. They don't compare to Joe Biden. But here's what Kevin Hastert explained.
We did an analysis when we first got into the White House that showed that almost all of the job creation that happened under President Biden was the employment of illegal aliens.
They're all illegal aliens. And here's Tom Homan explaining why we can't allow immigrant babies into the country.
Homicide, sexual assault, sexual assault, sexual assault, rape, sexual assault, rape, 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 sexual assault, homicide, rape, homicide, sexual assault, homicide, rape, sexual assault, kidnapping, sexual assault, rape, homicide, homicide.
I don't know what he's talking about. I would assume somebody sent that to me. He was on Fox News yesterday. And so I don't know. I would assume
homicide, sexual assault, sexual assault, sexual assault, rape, sexual assault, rape, 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 sexual assault, homicide, rape, homicide, sexual assault, homicide, rape, sexual assault, kidnapping, sexual assault, rape, homicide, homicide.
That is probably Stephen Miller's Pornhub search record. That's probably all his fetishes. This is Ralph Norman, congressman from South Carolina, true patriot. In 2021, after January 6, Ralph Norman sent a text to then White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Trump's White House Chief of Staff, after January 6, just a couple of days before Biden's inauguration. This is what Ralph Norman wrote to Mark Meadows, White House Chief of Staff. Mark, in seeing what's happening so quickly and reading about the Dominion lawsuits attempting to stop any meaningful investigation, we are at a point of no return in saving our republic. Our last hope is invoking martial law. Please urge to President to do so. And Ralph Norman was asked, do you have any regrets about sending this? He said, well, I misspelled martial law. Invoke martial law. Here he is on Newsmax yesterday. As you know, South Carolina, he's a white congressman from South Carolina. They want to get rid of Jim Clyburn's congressional seat. They want to get rid of the one Democratic congressional seat that's occupied by Jim Clyburn, who I think is 85. I know he's black. Here's Ralph Norman explaining why Henry McMaster, the governor of South Carolina, should extend the legislative session to redraw the maps and get rid of Jim Clyburn's congressional district.
Jim Clyburn, I like him personally, but he does not represent the rest of South Carolina, which is conservative. His district is close to 47% African American, and then 41%, and with 6% makeup of Hispanics.
He does not represent the rest of South Carolina, which is conservative. And then he cites the stats showing how black and Hispanic that district is. Well, here's the thing about South Carolina and Jim Clyburn. One of the things douchebags like me learned in 2020 is there are a lot of black conservatives. Jim Clyburn is personally responsible for Joe Biden winning the Democratic nomination. It was the South Carolina firewall. Bernie looked like he was going to take the nomination, and it was Jim Clyburn and the conservative blacks in South Carolina who turned it around for Joe Biden. So black people are way more conservative than Ralph Norman wants to admit. They didn't vote for Bernie, in South Carolina at least. They went with Biden, who was running a conservative campaign at the time. When he got elected, Biden moved to the left. But he was, in terms of Democrats, one of the more conservative candidates. And Jim Clyburn is, for a Democrat, conservative. Here is Harriet Hageman. This is her looking in the mirror, catching her reflection in the mirror. She always has that response. That is what you call a miskite. Harriet Hageman is the congresswoman from Wyoming, and she is a Republican, and she defeated Liz Cheney in the 2022 GOP primary because Liz Cheney was on the January 6th committee looking into the insurrection. So Harriet Hageman, miskite, is the Republican Congress miskite from Wyoming. And here she is telling us that Republicans aren't racist. It's the Democrats who are racist. And she's steeped in history.
The Aryan Nation, the Nazis, and the KKK are not far-right organizations. Those are far-left organizations, and they always have been.
Right, because Hitler called the Nazis the National Socialist Party, so Hitler wouldn't lie. Why would Hitler, when has he ever misled voters, Hitler? Yes, the Aryan Nation and the KKK and the Nazis are far-left organizations. What she's trying to say is that they're Democrats. They're not. That's what she said. Go on.
The KKK was created and started by the Democrats in the United States to prevent blacks from being able to participate in the political arena, if you will.
Right, because in the 19th century, the Democrats were pro-slavery, and Republicans were the party of Lincoln, and everything changed in 1960, 64, 65, and Republicans morphed into the racist party. Nixon's Southern strategy, Reagan starting his presidential campaign in 1980 in Philadelphia, Mississippi, the site of the KKK murdering 3 civil rights activists, declaring he supports states' rights. Parties change over the centuries, you meeskite.
I'm going to say they've never been associated with the right. They've always been associated with the left.
Right. The right, like David Duke, Democrat. Spencer, Democrat. Fuentes, Nick Fuentes, a self-described Nazi. He's a Democrat. The dirty, dark secret up on Capitol Hill is all Democratic staffers under the age of 30 are big Nick Fuentes. Oh, no, that's Republicans. That's right. Check out who the head of the Young Republicans is right now and his support for literally Nazi candidates. There are no Nazi candidates running in the Democratic Party. They're all inside the Republican Party, you meeskite.
Do I think that there are racists out there? I do, Winston. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist, number one, on the right, and number two, it does not exist at the level that they want everybody to believe.
Well, that tells you you're a racist right now. Just, it's not as bad as they want you to believe. That pretty much anybody who says that is a racist. This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. I'm going to give the last word to border czar Tom Homan, because where is he? Let's give the last word. Do we have him? Did I lose him? Where's border czar Tom Homan? I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. I guess I lost Tom Homan. That was my favorite clip. Thank you for listening. All right, I went a little over 2 hours. Please share this episode. Please hit the like button. I'm told that's the best way to make sure you keep getting these episodes. I'm live Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday at 6:05 p.m. Eastern. I think I have to go live at 9:05 Thursday because my back is out. So I have to go to the doctor to have him look at my back. So I'm probably going to start at 9:05 p.m. Eastern on Thursday to get my back looked at. A lot of repressed rage, and it goes to your back. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room. Sign up for my newsletter by going to davidfeldmanshow.com. Thank you. Leave a comment. I read all your comments.